I'm Mabel Wilson, 61 years old, and I've spent my entire life believing that a mother's love is unconditional. Today was supposed to be perfect. My only son, Kevin, was getting married to Jennifer in the garden wedding we had all been planning for months. But when I arrived at the reception, I found my seat had been replaced with a literal trash can. "It's just a joke, don't be so dramatic," my daughter-in-law said while everyone laughed. If you've ever felt disrespected by family, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe and join me as I share what happened next. After my husband Richard passed away from a sudden heart attack, I was left alone to raise our son Kevin, who was only 8 years old at the time. We had been a happy family of 3 living in a modest home in suburban Pennsylvania. Richard had been a high school teacher, and I worked part-time as a nurse at the local clinic. His death shattered our world completely, but I knew I had to be strong for Kevin. With only my income to support us, I took on extra shifts at the hospital and picked up weekend work at a nearby nursing home. Some nights I would come home so exhausted that I could barely prepare dinner, but I always made time to help Kevin with his homework and tuck him into bed. Those years were difficult, but watching my boy grow into a thoughtful, intelligent young man made every sacrifice worthwhile. Kevin had always been academically gifted, taking after his father's love for science. When he expressed interest in becoming a doctor, I did everything in my power to support his dream. I worked overtime for years to save for his college education, often going without new clothes or small luxuries for myself. During his pre-med years, I would send care packages with homemade cookies and encouraging notes even when my budget was tight. All those sacrifices paid off when Kevin graduated from medical school with honors. I still remember sitting in the audience at his graduation ceremony, tears streaming down my face as he walked across the stage in his cap and gown. He looked back at me in the audience and gave me a small private wave that meant everything. That was one of the proudest moments of my life. Kevin began his residency at Philadelphia General Hospital, where he met Jennifer Adams, a pharmaceutical sales representative who frequently visited the hospital. When he first told me about her, his eyes lit up in a way I hadn't seen before. "Mom, she's incredible," he said. "Smart, ambitious, and she makes me laugh." I was thrilled that my son had found someone who made him happy. The first few times Jennifer came to dinner at my home, she was charming and attentive. She complimented my cooking, asked questions about Kevin's childhood, and even brought me a beautiful orchid plant. "It's so nice to meet the woman who raised such an amazing man," she told me, squeezing my hand warmly. I felt instantly drawn to her and hopeful about their relationship. However, things began to change subtly after they had been dating for about 6 months. Jennifer started making small comments about my home. "This place could really use updating," she would say, or, "Don't you think it's time to replace this old furniture?" At first I brushed these remarks aside, assuming she was just trying to be helpful. Kevin's behavior toward me started changing too. He called less frequently and often had excuses for why they couldn't come for our traditional Sunday dinners. When they did visit, Jennifer would frequently check her watch or steer the conversation toward her family and their connections. I noticed Kevin deferring to her opinions more and more, sometimes contradicting things he had previously believed. I later discovered that Jennifer came from considerable wealth. Her father owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Northeast, and her mother was from a prominent banking family. They lived in a mansion in one of Philadelphia's most exclusive neighborhoods, and were accustomed to a lifestyle far different from the one Kevin had grown up with. Despite my growing concerns, I was overjoyed when Kevin called to tell me they were expecting a baby. "You're going to be a grandmother, Mom," he exclaimed. 9 months later, little Tommy was born, and the moment I held him in my arms, I fell completely in love. He had Kevin's nose and my late husband's dimpled chin. Being Tommy's grandmother gave me a renewed sense of purpose. Yet even during this happy time, I noticed Jennifer's parents took center stage. They were given the first opportunity to hold Tommy at the hospital, and Jennifer's mother, Evelyn, often made comments about how the baby would carry on the Addams family legacy. When I offered to babysit so the new parents could rest, Jennifer politely declined, saying her mother had already arranged for their longtime nanny to help. Still, I treasured every moment with my grandson and tried to maintain a positive relationship with Jennifer for Kevin and Tommy's sake. I had no idea how much worse things would get in the years to come, or that the birth of my grandson would eventually lead to one of the most painful revelations of my life. The wedding preparations began immediately after Kevin proposed, with a diamond ring that must have cost at least 3 months of his salary. Jennifer wanted a perfect wedding, and her parents were eager to spare no expense. When I offered to help with the planning, Jennifer smiled tightly and said, "That's sweet, Mabel, but Mom and I have already hired the best wedding planner in Philadelphia. We've got it covered." I tried not to feel hurt when I wasn't included in the dress shopping expedition. "It's just going to be Mom, my sisters, and my closest girlfriends," Jennifer explained. "The boutique can only accommodate so many people." I nodded understandingly, only to see photos on social media, later showing a large group of women, including distant cousins and Jennifer's mother's friends, all toasting with champagne in an exclusive bridal salon. The same pattern continued with venue selection and menu tastings. I would hear about decisions after they had already been made. We chose the grand ballroom at the Rittenhouse. Kevin informed me casually over the phone one evening. Jennifer's parents insisted on covering it. When I mentioned that I had been saving to contribute to the wedding, Kevin awkwardly cleared his throat. "That's not necessary, Mom. The Adamses want to handle everything." One evening I spent hours creating a handmade memory book filled with photos of Kevin growing up, thinking it would be a meaningful gift for the couple. When I presented it to them during a rare dinner at my house, Jennifer flipped through it quickly and set it aside. "It's very homemade," she said with a forced smile. "Not really our aesthetic, but thanks for the thought." Kevin, who once would have treasured such a gift, merely shrugged. "We're going for a more modern vibe with our decor, Mum." The book sat untouched on my coffee table for the remainder of their visit. After they left, I found it had been accidentally left behind. As the wedding date approached, Kevin became increasingly distant. When I called, he often seemed rushed and distracted. "Sorry, Mum, I can't talk now. Jennifer needs me to approve some wedding details." Our conversations, once filled with warmth and laughter, became brief and perfunctory. The son who used to share everything with me now shared very little. During one of the pre-wedding events, I overheard Jennifer talking to her bridesmaids in the bathroom. Not realizing I was in one of the stalls, she launched into a mocking impression of my outfit. "Did you see what Mabel is wearing? That department store dress must be at least 10 years old." I told Kevin we should have hired her a stylist, but he said she'd be offended. The women's laughter cut through me like a knife, but I remained silent, too humiliated to reveal myself. The rehearsal dinner was particularly painful. Despite being Kevin's only parent, I was seated at a table far from the main wedding party, with distant relatives of Jennifer's, whom I'd never met. Meanwhile, Jennifer's extended family occupied the places of honor. When I quietly asked the wedding planner if there had been a mistake, she checked her clipboard and briskly informed me this seating arrangement was approved by the bride personally. Throughout all these slights, what concerned me most was how Jennifer treated Tommy when she thought no one was watching. At family gatherings, she would be the picture of maternal devotion when cameras were out, but the moment phones were put away, her demeanor would change dramatically. She would snap at Tommy for minor infractions, roll her eyes when he needed attention, and often palm him off to Kevin or a babysitter. One day, while helping Kevin search for some documents in his home office, I came across papers that shocked me. Hidden in a drawer were divorce papers from Jennifer's previous marriage. This was stunning, because Jennifer had always presented herself as never having been married before. According to the documents, the divorce had been finalized just 6 months before she met Kevin. When I carefully broached the subject with Kevin, his face flushed with anger. "That's private, Mom. Why were you snooping through our things?" When I explained I had found the papers accidentally, he softened slightly, but remained defensive. "Jennifer had a brief marriage right after college. It was a mistake, and she doesn't like talking about it. She asked me not to mention it to anyone, including you." This discovery left me uneasy. It wasn't the fact of the previous marriage that bothered me, but the deliberate deception. What else might Jennifer be hiding? As the wedding day approached, this question lingered in my mind, along with growing concerns about my place in my son's new life. The morning of Kevin and Jennifer's wedding arrived with perfect blue skies and a gentle breeze. Despite all the tension of the preceding months, I woke up feeling hopeful. This was my only child's wedding day, and I was determined to make it special, regardless of my personal feelings toward Jennifer. I had spent a significant portion of my savings on a new dress for the occasion, an elegant powder blue gown that the saleswoman assured me was both mother of the groom appropriate and fashionable. I also splurged on professional hair and makeup services, wanting to look my best for the photographs that would commemorate this important day. Before leaving my house, I carefully wrapped the gift I had chosen for the couple, a pair of sterling silver candlesticks that had belonged to my grandmother, along with a check that represented almost all of my modest savings. Despite Jennifer's parents' wealth, I wanted to contribute something meaningful to help the young couple start their life together. The ceremony was scheduled for 2:00 p.m. in the Botanical Gardens, with the reception to follow at the Grand Ballroom. I arrived an hour early, as requested, in the detailed itinerary Jennifer's wedding planner had distributed. The gardens were transformed with thousands of white roses and crystal decorations that caught the sunlight. It was breathtakingly beautiful, if a bit more ostentatious than I would have chosen. Jennifer's family members arrived in a procession of luxury cars, the women in designer dresses and the men in tailored suits. When I approached Jennifer's mother Evelyn to say hello, she looked me up and down before offering a brief, cool greeting. "Oh, Mabel, that color is interesting on you." She quickly turned away to fuss over the flower arrangements, leaving me standing alone. The ceremony itself was lovely. I cried when Kevin recited his vows, promising to love Jennifer forever. For a moment, as I watched my son pledge his life to his bride, all my doubts and hurts fell away. He looked so handsome, so grown up, and so happy. In that moment, I thought perhaps things would improve after the wedding. Maybe once the stress of planning was over, Jennifer would be more accepting of me. After the ceremony, guests made their way to the ballroom for the reception. I followed the crowd, admiring the elaborate decor that must have cost a fortune. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Each table was adorned with towering flower arrangements, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. As I approached the head table, where the bride and groom would be seated, I looked for my place card. Unable to find it, I asked one of the waitstaff for assistance. Wilson, he muttered, checking the seating chart. "Ah, Mrs. Wilson, mother of the groom. You're at table 19. Table 19 turned out to be in the far corner of the room, next to the kitchen entrance. When I arrived at the table, I was stunned to discover that where my seat should have been, there was a small garbage can with my name taped to it. Not a decorative container, but an actual plastic trash receptacle. I stood frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. The other guests at the table looked equally uncomfortable, averting their eyes or pretending to be engaged in conversation. One elderly gentleman, whom I later learned was Jennifer's great-uncle, muttered, "Disgraceful," under his breath. Just as I was trying to decide what to do, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Jennifer, surrounded by a group of her bridesmaids, all of them barely suppressing giggles. "Oh, Mabel, don't look so shocked. It's just a little wedding prank." Her voice was loud enough to attract the attention of nearby guests. "I don't understand," I said quietly, fighting back tears. "Why would you do this?" Jennifer rolled her eyes dramatically. "It's just a joke. Don't be so dramatic. Everyone does silly things at weddings." She gestured around as if seeking agreement from the onlookers, many of whom were now watching the scene unfold. To my horror, several people, including some I recognized as Kevin's friends, actually laughed. And then I saw Kevin approaching. For a moment I felt relief, certain my son would put a stop to this humiliation. Instead, he put his arm around Jennifer and smiled indulgently. "Come on, Mom, where's your sense of humor?" Jennifer's brothers pull pranks like this all the time. It's tradition in her family. His words felt like a physical blow. One of Jennifer's bridesmaids was actually taking photos of my reaction, and another said loudly, This is so going on Instagram. My humiliation was apparently entertainment for their social media followers. I have never felt so small, so insignificant in my entire life, not even when I was struggling as a single mother, working multiple jobs to make ends meet, had I felt this level of shame and hurt. This was my son, the person I had sacrificed everything for, participating in my public humiliation on what should have been one of the happiest days of our family's life. With as much dignity as I could muster, I turned away, desperately needing to escape the stares and whispers. As I made my way toward the ladies' room, a young server stepped into my path. She was perhaps in her early 20s, with kind eyes that were filled with sympathy. "Ma'am, that was horrible. I have an extra chair in the service area. Let me bring it to your table and remove that thing." She looked genuinely distressed on my behalf. "Thank you," I whispered, touching her arm gratefully. "But I need a moment alone." In the relative safety of a bathroom stall, I allowed myself a few moments of intense, silent crying. I thought about leaving, about walking out of the reception, and never looking back. But the thought of missing my only son's wedding reception, of not being there for the important moments, was too painful to bear. After splashing cold water on my face and reapplying my lipstick, I made a decision. I would stay, not for Jennifer, not even for Kevin at this point, but for myself. I would not give them the satisfaction of driving me away. When I returned to the reception, the kind server had indeed replaced the trash can with a proper chair, though the damage to my dignity had already been done. Throughout the evening, I caught people glancing in my direction, some with pity, others still amused by the prank. I held my head high and tried to focus on the few genuine conversations I was able to have with some of the kinder guests. What I didn't know then was that the trash can incident, humiliating as it was, would soon be overshadowed by an even more shocking revelation. I returned to the reception with as much grace as I could manage, determined not to let Jennifer's cruelty ruin my only son's wedding day entirely. I sat at my table, making polite conversation with the strangers seated around me, most of whom were distant relatives of Jennifer's, who seemed to have been similarly relegated to this back corner of the ballroom. As the evening progressed, I excused myself to visit the ladies' room again. On my way back, I took a wrong turn and found myself in a quiet corridor near the bridal suite. I was about to turn around when I heard Jennifer's voice through the partially open door. "Kevin is so clueless," Jennifer was saying, her voice slurred slightly from champagne. "He actually thinks I care about his medical research, as if I married him for his brilliant mind." She laughed, a harsh sound so different from the melodious laugh she used around Kevin. "At least he's good-looking," another female voice responded. "And the doctor's salary doesn't hurt." "True, but dealing with his pathetic mother is such a drag. Did you see her face when she saw the trash can? Priceless Kevin was worried it was going too far, but I told him it would be hilarious." My heart sank further at the confirmation that Kevin had known about the prank in advance, but what Jennifer said next stopped me cold. The funniest part is how Kevin dotes on Tommy, talking about how the kid has his eyes or his grandfather's smile. Jennifer's laughter turned cruel. "If he only knew, but Stephen and I agreed it's better this way." "Stephen, your ex?" the other woman asked, sounding shocked. "We had a little reunion right before I got pregnant. Kevin was working nights that month, remember? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Kevin is a better father than Stephen would ever be, and he's completely devoted to me and his son." The blood rushed from my face as I processed what I had just heard. Tommy, my beautiful grandson, whom I loved with all my heart, wasn't Kevin's biological child, and Jennifer had deliberately deceived my son about something so fundamental. I stumbled away from the door, my mind racing. This explained the nagging feeling I'd had about Tommy's appearance. While I'd always thought he was beautiful, there were no distinct Wilson family traits in his features. No sign of Richard's cleft chin, that Kevin had inherited none of the distinctive eye shape that had marked generations of my husband's family. I made my way to a quiet corner of the venue and opened my purse with trembling hands. Inside was an envelope I had been carrying for months, unsure whether I would ever share its contents with Kevin. It contained the results of a DNA test I had secretly conducted. My suspicions had begun during Tommy's second birthday party. Jennifer's mother had made a comment about how Tommy looked just like Jennifer's cousin Michael at that age, and something in the way she glanced at Jennifer had struck me as odd. Later that day, I noticed a framed photo of Jennifer with a man who looked remarkably similar to Tommy. When I casually asked who the man was, Jennifer had snatched the photo away. "Just an old friend from college. I don't know why Mom still has this out." She had quickly changed the subject, but the seed of doubt was planted in my mind. A few weeks later, while babysitting Tommy, I had made the difficult decision to collect a strand of his hair for DNA testing. I also managed to take Kevin's toothbrush during a family dinner at their home, replacing it with an identical new one so he wouldn't notice. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where none existed because of my strained relationship with Jennifer. When the results came back confirming that Kevin and Tommy were not biologically related, I had been devastated. I kept the report unable to decide what to do with this terrible knowledge. I had told myself it would only hurt Kevin to know that despite the deception, he loved Tommy as his own son. The bond they shared was real, regardless of biology. But now hearing Jennifer joke about her deception, using it as cocktail party entertainment with her friend, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about a personal grudge between Jennifer and me anymore. This was about my son's entire life being built on a fundamental lie. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, then around at the lavish reception continuing around me. The fairy lights and flowers, the expensive champagne flowing freely, the picture-perfect bride and groom dancing among their admiring guests. All of it felt hollow and false. As I watched Jennifer laughing with her bridesmaids, occasionally casting smug glances in my direction, something hardened inside me. Years of allowing myself to be pushed aside, of watching my son being manipulated, of swallowing my hurt for the sake of peace, all came rushing to the surface. I had spent most of my life putting others first. I had sacrificed my own dreams to give Kevin everything. I had endured Jennifer's cruelty and disrespect to maintain a relationship with my son and grandson. But in this moment, looking at the DNA test results and remembering Jennifer's callous words, I realized that sometimes the truth, however painful, was necessary. The question was no longer whether to reveal what I knew, but when and how. As the wedding reception continued around me, I made my decision. Tonight, the years of disrespect would end. Tonight, the truth would finally come to light. The reception was in full swing. The 5-tier wedding cake had been cut, the champagne toasts delivered by Jennifer's father and the best man. The band was playing as couples filled the dance floor. Through it all, I sat at my isolated table, the DNA test results burning a hole in my purse, watching as my son celebrated his marriage to a woman who had been deceiving him for years. According to the printed program placed at each table, there would soon be an open mic for wedding guests who wished to offer additional toasts or well wishes to the couple. As the master of ceremonies announced this portion of the evening, I felt a strange calm descend over me. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I approached the small stage where the band was set up, nodding to the MC, who seemed surprised to see the mother of the groom finally making an appearance in the proceedings. When he handed me the microphone, I took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of faces turned toward me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mabel Wilson Kevin's mother. I began my voice steadier than I expected. First, I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate this special day with our families. From the corner of my eye, I saw Jennifer visibly relax, perhaps thinking I wasn't going to cause a scene after all. Kevin was watching me warily, his expression a mixture of guilt and apprehension. Family is everything to me, I continued. When my husband Richard passed away, leaving me alone with our 8-year-old son, I dedicated my life to ensuring Kevin had every opportunity to thrive. I worked multiple jobs so he could pursue his dream of becoming a doctor. I skipped meals so he could have new school clothes. Every decision I made was with his happiness and well-being in mind. The room had grown quiet now, the guests sensing that this wasn't a typical mother-of-the-groom speech. Jennifer was whispering urgently to Kevin, who was shaking his head slightly. So imagine my surprise when I arrived at my only son's wedding reception today to find my seat replaced with a trash can. I paused as gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. When I expressed my hurt, I was told, "It's just a joke, don't be so dramatic." I looked directly at Jennifer, whose face had drained of color. I've spent 3 years watching as I was gradually pushed out of my son's life. I've endured countless small humiliations and slights. I've been excluded from family events, had my gifts rejected, and been mocked for my middle-class background. Through it all, I kept silent for Kevin's sake and for my grandson Tommy, whom I love with all my heart. Kevin had stood up now, his expression a mixture of embarrassment and anger. "Mom, this isn't the time or place for this," he called out. But I wasn't finished. "I agree that wedding days should be joyful occasions, free from unpleasantness," I said, "which is why I've kept a difficult truth to myself for many months now. But since respect and honesty don't seem to be values in this new family being created today, perhaps it's time for complete honesty." I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope containing the DNA test results. "Kevin, I didn't want to believe what these results told me, but after what I overheard Jennifer saying tonight about Tommy's true parentage, I can't keep this from you any longer." The room erupted into shocked whispers. Jennifer lunged forward, attempting to reach me, but was held back by her father. "She's lying," she shouted. "She's just bitter and trying to ruin our day." Kevin looked confused, his gaze darting between Jennifer and me. "Mom, what are you talking about?" With a heavy heart, I said, "Tommy is not your biological son, Kevin. Jennifer was still involved with her ex-husband, Stephen, when she became pregnant." I walked across the room and handed the envelope directly to Kevin, whose hands shook as he took it. "I had these tests done months ago, but couldn't bear to tell you. Then tonight, I overheard Jennifer boasting to her friend about how you would never know the truth about Tommy's father." Jennifer was now frantically denying everything, but the panic in her eyes told a different story. Kevin opened the envelope with trembling fingers and scanned the contents. His face crumpled as the truth sank in. "Is this true?" he asked Jennifer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is Tommy not my son?" The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer's initial denials faltered under Kevin's direct question and the evidence in his hands. Her expression shifted from defiance to calculation. "It was one time, Kevin," she finally admitted, her voice taking on a pleading quality. "A moment of weakness when you were working so much. It didn't mean anything. Tommy is your son in every way that matters." Kevin's face hardened as the full impact of the betrayal hit him. He turned to Jennifer's parents. "Did you know about this?" The guilty look that passed between Evelyn and Robert Adams provided the answer. Kevin laughed bitterly. "So everyone knew except me. The trash can makes sense now. That's exactly how all of you have treated my mother and me from the beginning." Jennifer's father stepped forward, lowering his voice. "Kevin, let's discuss this privately. There's no need for a public scene." "A public scene," Kevin repeated incredulously. "Like the one you all enjoyed at my mother's expense earlier." "No, I think we're past the point of privacy." The reception hall had erupted into chaos. Guests were whispering frantically, some were recording on their phones, and Jennifer's bridesmaids looked stunned. Jennifer herself had dissolved into tears, though I noticed they seemed to turn on and off, depending on who was watching her. "Everyone, please." The wedding planner was desperately trying to regain control of the situation. "Let's give the bride and groom some space." But it was too late for damage control. Kevin had removed his wedding ring and placed it on the table. "I want a paternity test, an official one," he told Jennifer coldly. "And until then, this marriage is over before it's even begun." As Kevin walked out of the reception hall, Jennifer collapsed dramatically into her mother's arms. Her father approached me, his voice low and threatening. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you know who we are in this community?" I met his gaze unflinchingly. "I know exactly what I've done. I've told my son the truth that all of you were happy to keep from him, and I don't care who you are or how much money you have. You can't buy the right to treat people like garbage." As I turned to follow Kevin, I caught sight of Tommy being held by one of Jennifer's cousins, who had been acting as a babysitter during the reception. The little boy looked confused and frightened by the commotion. My heart broke for him, an innocent child caught in the middle of adult deception. What had begun as a fairy tale wedding had ended in revelations and chaos. As I left the reception hall, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, yes, but also profound sadness for my son, for Tommy, and for the family that could have been if it had been built on honesty instead of lies. The hours and days following the wedding reception were a blur of emotional chaos. I found Kevin sitting alone in his car in the parking lot, his head in his hands. When he saw me approach, he unlocked the door to let me in. "Is it really true?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Tommy isn't mine." "The test results indicate that yes," I said gently. "I'm so sorry, Kevin. I struggled for months with whether to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you, but after what happened tonight, why didn't you tell me sooner?" There was anger in his voice, but also devastating hurt. "I thought about it constantly. But you love Tommy so much and he loves you. I worried about what it would do to both of you. And truthfully, I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, that you'd see it as me trying to come between you and Jennifer." Kevin was quiet for a long moment. "You know what hurts the most? Not just the betrayal, but realizing how they've all been laughing at me. Jennifer, her parents, probably her friends too. They've all known I'm raising another man's child while thinking he's mine." I reached out to touch his arm, but he pulled away. "And you, Mom, you kept this from me too." "I did," I admitted. "And maybe that was wrong. I honestly didn't know what the right thing to do was." We sat in silence for several minutes before Kevin spoke again. "I need some time alone. I can't talk to anyone right now, not even you." With a heavy heart, I got out of his car. "I love you, Kevin. And I love Tommy. Whatever happens, please remember that." He didn't respond, just started the engine and drove away. I returned to my empty home emotionally and physically exhausted. Throughout the night, my phone buzzed with text messages and calls, most from guests who had witnessed the dramatic scene. I ignored them all, needing space to process the intense emotions of the day. The next morning, I was surprised to receive a call from Jennifer's father, Robert Adams. His tone was businesslike, all traces of the anger from the night before, carefully controlled. "Mabel, I think we need to discuss how to handle this unfortunate situation," he began without preamble. "I'm not sure there's anything to discuss," I replied. "Let's be practical. This scandal could damage Kevin's reputation at the hospital, not to mention our family's standing in the community. I'm prepared to offer you a significant sum of money to keep this matter private." I was stunned by his audacity. "You're trying to buy my silence after everything your family has done. I'm offering a practical solution," he countered smoothly. $250,000. It could make your retirement very comfortable. All we ask is that you sign a non-disclosure agreement and refrain from discussing last night's events with anyone." "Mr. Adams," I said, finding strength in my anger. "There isn't enough money in the world to buy my integrity. What matters to me is my son's well-being and the truth. I suggest you focus on your daughter's honesty issues rather than trying to silence me." I hung up the phone, trembling with indignation. The fact that they thought I could be bought off only confirmed that they had never seen me as a person worthy of respect. Later that day, I received a brief text from Kevin. "Jennifer confessed. Tommy isn't mine. DNA test scheduled for confirmation. Don't contact me for now. Need space." My heart broke reading those words, knowing my son was going through the most painful experience of his adult life, and he didn't want my support. But I respected his wishes, sending only a brief message in return. "I understand. I'm here when you're ready." That evening, I was surprised by a knock at my door. When I opened it, I found Lisa, one of the servers from the wedding reception. She was the same kind young woman who had offered to replace the trash can with a proper chair. "Mrs. Wilson, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I found your address in the event information." She looked nervous but determined. "I wanted to check if you're okay after what happened yesterday. That was the most intense wedding I've ever worked." Touched by her concern, I invited her in for tea. As we talked, she revealed that the catering staff had been appalled by the trash can joke and Jennifer's treatment of me. "None of us thought it was funny," Lisa assured me. Actually, several guests approached us afterward, saying they were horrified too. One older gentleman, I think he was a colleague of your son's, asked for your contact information. He said he wanted to reach out to express his support. Lisa's visit was the first moment of genuine human connection I'd experienced since the wedding disaster. Her simple kindness in checking on me restored a small measure of my faith in people. The following morning brought another shock. Jennifer had taken Tommy and disappeared. Kevin called in a panic, his anger at me temporarily forgotten. "She's gone, Mum. She took Tommy and left. Her parents claim they don't know where she is, but I don't believe them." My concern for Tommy overrode everything else. "Have you called the police?" "Yes, but they say there's no crime since she's his mother, and until the paternity test I have no legal grounds to stop her from taking him wherever she wants." The desperation in Kevin's voice was heartbreaking. "Mom, regardless of DNA, he's my son. I've raised him since birth. I can't lose him." Despite the complicated feelings between us, I spent the rest of the day helping Kevin contact lawyers and trying to track down Jennifer through mutual acquaintances. Watching my son fight for the child he loved, regardless of biology, filled me with pride despite the terrible circumstances. That night alone in my house, I broke down completely for the first time since the wedding. I cried for Kevin, for Tommy, for the family that was being torn apart by lies and manipulation. I even cried for myself, for the years of disrespect I had endured, and for the difficult position I had been placed in by discovering the truth about Tommy's parentage. Yet amidst the tears, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth, painful as it was, had finally come to light. And with truth, however difficult, comes the possibility of healing. 6 months after the wedding, that never truly became a marriage, I sat in my small garden, watching as the first spring flowers pushed through the soil. Like those persistent blooms, I too had been slowly rebuilding my life from the ground up. In the immediate aftermath of the wedding disaster, I had faced some of the darkest days of my life. Kevin's initial anger at me, though understandable, had been painful to bear. Jennifer's disappearance with Tommy had thrown us all into a state of anxiety and legal complications, and the whispers and gossip that spread through our community had been difficult to ignore. 3 weeks after she left, Jennifer returned with Tommy, apparently having realized that her parents wouldn't support her financially if she didn't face the situation responsibly. The official paternity test confirmed what we already knew: Kevin was not Tommy's biological father. The results also identified Stephen, Jennifer's ex-husband, as the biological parent. What followed was a complicated and painful legal battle. Kevin, despite not being Tommy's biological father, filed for custody rights based on his role as Tommy's psychological parent since birth. Jennifer fought this initially, but her position weakened when Stephen himself came forward, having been contacted by Jennifer during her 3-week disappearance. Stephen, it turned out, had mixed feelings about the situation. While shocked to learn he had a child, he had recently remarried and wasn't eager to take on full parental responsibilities. This created an unusual dynamic where 3 adults now had to determine what was best for one confused little boy. Throughout this difficult time, I maintained my distance, as Kevin had requested checking in occasionally, but respecting his need for space. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, 2 months after the wedding, Kevin showed up at my door unannounced. "Mom," he said simply, his eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion, "I need to talk to you." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had helped him with homework as a child, where we had celebrated his acceptance to medical school, where we had shared countless meals and conversations over the years. "I owe you an apology," he began. "I was angry at you for keeping the test results from me, for choosing that moment to reveal the truth. But I've had time to think, and I understand you were in an impossible position." I reached across the table to take his hand. I questioned myself constantly about whether I was doing the right thing. "All I ever wanted was to protect you." "I know that now," Kevin admitted. "And looking back, I can see how Jennifer and her family treated you. The trash can wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of disrespect that I allowed to happen." He looked down ashamed. "I chose to ignore it because it was easier than confronting it. You were in love, I said gently. I was blind, he corrected. Or maybe I just didn't want to see who Jennifer really was. Either way, I failed you, Mum. After everything you sacrificed for me, I let someone treat you like you didn't matter. That conversation marked the beginning of healing between us. Kevin suggested we start seeing a family counselor together to work through the complex emotions of the past few years. Those sessions became a safe space where we could be honest about our feelings and rebuild our relationship on a stronger foundation. The legal battle over Tommy eventually resulted in an unusual custody arrangement. Kevin was granted significant parenting time due to his established relationship with Tommy, while Jennifer maintained primary physical custody. Stephen agreed to child support and occasional visitation as the biological father. Most importantly to me, the custody agreement specifically included grandmother visitation rights, ensuring that I would remain a consistent presence in Tommy's life. The first time I was able to see my grandson after the custody agreement was finalized, I held him close, marveling at how resilient children can be. At 3.5, he was too young to fully understand the adult complications swirling around him, but he knew he was loved by many people. Gamma Mabel, he said, using his special name for me. I missed you. I missed you too, sweetie, I replied, my heart full. So very much. Through those difficult months, I also focused on rebuilding my own life beyond my identity as Kevin's mother. I joined a support group for parents estranged from their adult children, which helped me process the pain of the previous years, even as Kevin and I were reconciling. There I met other women and men who understood the unique heartbreak of family rejection, and I formed friendships that became an important part of my healing journey. I also reconnected with former nursing colleagues and began volunteering at a community clinic, using my medical skills to help others while giving structure to my days. Gradually, I rediscovered parts of myself that had been overshadowed by years of focusing primarily on Kevin's needs and navigating the difficulties with Jennifer. One unexpected development was my friendship with Lisa, the kind server from the wedding. She was studying nursing while working catering jobs to pay her tuition, and when she learned about my nursing background, she asked if I would mentor her. Our weekly coffee meetings to discuss her studies evolved into a genuine friendship that bridged our age difference. Kevin, meanwhile, threw himself into therapy and rebuilding his life as a single father with part-time custody. He put the house he had shared with Jennifer on the market, unable to live among reminders of their relationship. He moved into a smaller but warm apartment with a bedroom decorated specially for Tommy's overnight stays. Watching my son navigate this difficult transition with growing wisdom and self-awareness filled me with pride. The pain had changed him, but in many ways it had changed him for the better. He was more thoughtful now, more attuned to others' feelings, and more appreciative of genuine relationships. You know what I've realized, Mom, he said during one of our Sunday dinners, which we had reinstated as a tradition. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Tommy may not have my DNA, but he's my son in all the ways that matter. And you taught me that through how you loved me. Those words healed something deep inside me. Through all the pain and conflict, a profound truth had emerged. Family is defined not by genetics or social status or material wealth, but by love, respect, and commitment to one another's well-being. As I tended to my garden on that spring morning, 6 months after the wedding, I reflected on all we had been through. The humiliation of the trash can incident now seemed distant. Its power to hurt me diminished by the strength I had found in standing up for myself and for the truth. Life wasn't perfect. Co-parenting with Jennifer remained challenging, though she had become somewhat more respectful since the legal proceedings. Kevin still had moments of sadness about the family life he had envisioned that would never be. And I sometimes worried about Tommy growing up amid these complicated relationships, but we were moving forward with authenticity and love. I had learned that self-respect isn't selfish. That speaking truth, even when difficult, is ultimately an act of love. That it's never too late to build boundaries and require respectful treatment from others. Most importantly, I had learned that sometimes what feels like an ending is actually a beginning. The wedding day that imploded so spectacularly had cleared the way for something more genuine to grow from the ashes. A family defined not by appearances or social expectations, but by honest love and mutual respect. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself when it felt like the whole world was against you? Or have you discovered that family isn't always defined by blood? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story touched something in you, please hit like and subscribe to join our community of people sharing life's complicated truths. Remember, it's never too late to require respect and build the authentic relationships you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to stand in your truth, whatever that may be.